We are on. Great. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you're joining from. So finally, we got Anshuman today. We got out of him finally. So Anshuman is one of our favorite person whom I know. I think I mentioned in the first podcast we did. We have worked with three companies. It's been like more than a decade since I met Anshuman first time around, and he has a very interesting origin story on how we started in Pentest. So I'm going to give the baton to Anshuman. Anshuman, why don't you start? Like, how did you start your career in pen test? Somewhere from, I would say, probably a tough place to start because you're not in Bangalore or Hyderabad, although you shifted later over there, but from a place which is quite unknown, and you have to be really resourceful to build a career from small towns of India without much. So, over to you, Anshuman.
Yeah, thanks, Venu. So, and other thing you forgot to mention, right? Uh, the first plane journey, I think that is I have done with you, right? And
Right, right.
the domestic, and also I've got the chance to travel international. That is also because of you, right? So both of times was like the both times I onboarded the plane, and that is because of Venu. So that is two things that I still remember all the time because. uh, that happened working in a company and going to for a business trip. So talking about like the pentest journey, pentest journey is like before I move to the pentest journey, we need to think of what I used to think of as like uh, how we can bypass the security of anything, right? So that time we have like our websites, computers, that what we are using. So back then in our town, I hail from Jharkhand, Ranchi. So from where we started out, so in back those days we are using Windows XP and operating system, right? So in that, sometimes what happened is like I lost the computer, and the other option what we left is just to format it, nothing else, right? So in that way we understand this is the only thing that we can do to remove the password from the system. We can only format it. There is no other options. But later we thought of, or we what I discovered is like, okay, the people from the desktop what they is doing is they are removing the bios CMOS batteries, and after some time the password is going to be reset. It will not ask for the password, right? So that is how I learned there are the bypasses of the security that what we are using it, and we don't have to completely format our computers. So that is the journey. I think that is where it started. Then after we used to go to the cyber cafes for the tech tutorials, and we downloaded the stuff from there. We come to the home and then we read it out. So I started with the programmings, like how the systems, especially the web applications. So the websites are there. So how the websites interact, work, how we create a user, how the users do a sign up kind of things, how they try to get the login things works. After the login, what is a profile? What are the things they are allowed to do, what is the admin portal. So those kind of things I learned from there. I did my research to understand specific to the web applications, but I directly didn't land to that job. So I started with learning networks, computer networks. So I got my job into computer networks. Then I moved from computer networks to uh, like security of overall. It's depends on, it's like it covers web servers as well. It covers network equipments and the firewall stuffs as well. So I take care of those, and then moving to the journey, I found myself like I was more interested into the web application security, and then pen testing is a part of it. So I thought if you know the working of it, anything, then you'll find the flaws into it, right? So what flaws it has, first thing you need to know like how that thing works, right? So anything pen testing is just like finding the flaws into the system. So finding the flaws into the system, it means like you need to understand the application or whatever you are pen testing. So whatever you are auditing, just like pen testing means like you are going uh, uh, step deep into it. After you are auditing something, right, you are finding some vulnerabilities, then you are going ahead, a step ahead and exploiting it. So what I did is like I found there are other things. So I started with some dummy websites, like from where we can see how the vulnerabilities looks like, right? And then based on that, how you really try to exploit it and get into it, or whatever the outcome of it, or whatever your goal is. So to understand that, I get into the attacker's mind. So it means like you have to think like an attacker, right? So pen testing it, nothing's it is more like how attacker interacts to it, and uh, how what happen if he finds a vulnerability into the system or a flaw into the system, right? He can able to bypass it, and what is the end goal of the user. So to understand these, I think we need to understand the very basics of the security, uh, that what we started how we started. So basic of the security, if we call it like what the security is, right? If I ask you a definition what the security is in an enterprise, and then I think the only way we can define it is as a like kind of a goal that we are trying to fit into the system, right? It's not about only vulnerabilities or the exploits or anything. It's about a basic goal that is companies trying to achieve, plus thinking about the adversaries, like the bad guys who is trying to break those mis like will not mis like anyhow they are trying to uh, like do something to your systems, to your networks, and they will fail you to achieve that goals, right? So the goals means like if we break down to the goals, I think breaking down a goal is like the policy. The first thing is policy, right? So what a company is trying to achieve, and that's the reason they are making the policies. So policies, they are, if you see into the enterprises, there are a number of policies. It starts with like, for example, like the password policies, the use of application policy, except the other policies could be the installation policies, the whitelisting of softwares, right? So there are many policies that exist into this enterprise, and stating of the policies is the end goal of any organization. Second would be, I think, the threat modeling. I think so. The threat modeling is something we need to think like attacker at that stage. If you are thinking as an attacker, I think you can mitigate most of the things, and that is a really important step. And the third is like, as I said, the policy, right? So what you are doing technically to apply those policies into the organization in a technical way, right? So the controls and everything, the anything that is the control that you are trying to put in into the place. It could be the application, it could be network, it could be any other things, the people entering the office, right? So anything that you are putting into the policies, you are defining it. So pen testing is like the third, as I said, like the three steps. So threat modeling is what I think we can think of as an attacker, and then you get into the pen testing role. Pen testing is more like you are thinking of as an attacker, and then making your path into the system and what path you took. So if you go a little deeper, I think there are terms like the TTPs, or tactics. What is those tactics and TTPs?
Yeah, techniques.
Blame the
Tactics,
Sunday.
Yeah,
techniques, and
and procedures, right? So
procedures. Yeah.
yeah, and the other would be, I think, if you talk about most of the crimes that happen is like the term is MMO, I think, right? So means, motive, and opportunity, right? So if you club these things, they are interrelatable, and they are also goes hand by hand. So I think you need to understand these terms, cause I think pen testing is a technical term, but getting into the technical term, you need to think like that, right? So the MMO, if you talk about, right, so any kind of the crime that happens, they has three things common, and we'd have to look for any criminal investigators. They look for these three things in a criminal, right? Criminal's mind. So when you talk about MMO, like the means, right? What is the means, like the end goal kind of thing, the motive, right? So what tools they used, what is the motive, what is the end goal they are thinking as an attacker, right? And the opportunity, like opportunity means like suppose just example like the multi-factor authentication is missing, so that is they considered as opportunity. So end goal is like to do some kind of a damage to our company. That is like the motive of a attacker, right? Means like they find these kind of breach password details from the dark market, right? The dark web. So they already have now the motive and the means. The opportunity is the MFA is missing, and they are reusing the password, or maybe the password history they have not enabled, right? So anything they have got after 90 days, maybe they are using the same password. So it means like you need to think like that. Okay, so if you have these three things working, then you are inside the company. You have don't have to do any technical steps to get these things right. So any of the three things, if it is there in the attacker's mind, or maybe it will start with that as an opportunity. If you see like multi-factor authentication is missing, so maybe he'll think like, okay, what are the other things we can uh, try, like apart from our username and password, if I can look for the other user's name and password with the error messages, right? So what kind of technology they are using, so maybe from the opportunity it will go to the means and the motive of it. Yeah, right. So it doesn't make sense when it's like if it has the attacker has all the three things ready for him, and then the attack happens, it has to be any of the three things the attacker thinks. And suppose they have, there's a other example I can give you is like as a means, right? As a means like if you downloaded some kind of a DDoS attack tool from the internet, right? So I know like it will do a DDoS attack to any of the application, and I just try to use it, right? So here the means is like the DDoS application that is downloaded from the internet, and the motive could be like damaging, or maybe I'll just do it for fun, right? And the
Yep.
opportunity is like there is no DDoS protection enabled in the victim's website, right? At the victim's end.
Yep.
So if you combine these three things, you can easily execute an attack, right? So this is the very basic and very important thing. Like you have to do a kind of a threat modeling in this way, right? Technically, people are doing it mostly on like if you see the current examples, they are doing it over like a threat modeling tool in the Microsoft, right? They are making the components, the processes, right, the entities, and then they try to think like the attacker and doing it. That is a good way of doing it, like the stride, right? Stride way. Stride was a very like a known framework where we think of threat modeling and thinking of a attacker, like how
Yep.
that can happen and how to we mitigate it, right? It doesn't have to do anything as a code guide, because it is happening at the very initial label, right? The design label, where the planning label it could be at, right? It is so the code label, what we think of as a pen tester, like many people will jump into the codes, or maybe they're looking for the vulnerabilities, and they are thinking like, okay, if we exploit this vulnerability, or if the vulnerabilities can be exploited, they are put into the report, right? So the pen testing kind of thing. What they think is like maybe they'll become a pen tester, but beyond that, there are these things that what I talked about, right? These are the things to make you kind of think like that, and then it will give you uh, broad understanding of any kind of the threats, the real threats, and how to mitigate it. Then you take your career way ahead and focus on the top 10 of the WASPs, right? The pen testing listings, right? And the SANS 25 could be there. There are many vulnerabilities there. They exist. Maybe like I can say like 50% of the vulnerabilities that go by, or maybe uh, they won't be exist if we sanitize the inputs, right? Or maybe if we take care of the input validations into the systems, right? Because that is where I think most of the vulnerabilities are identified, or maybe it will not allow to execute or work. So that is a part I think that is important. The other way, as I said, right, the TTP and the MMOs. Why I gave the example of like if you really understand the MMO, then you can uh, look for any attack that is about to happen, or maybe you can mitigate it just like thinking of the attacker. But the TTP is also important. The way is if any attack happened, right? Suppose if any attack happened, then how you investigate it, how you do a kind of a forensic of it, right? So the
Yep.
forensic investigations require the TTPs, and the tactics is again the goal, right? The goal of the attacker into the cyber crime, related to the cyber crime. So anything. what goal it is, and due to the goal, what techniques he used, right? Just to suppose, like, what we see in the real life in the enterprises is like the tactics would be, or maybe the techniques, right? So the tactics would be generally, I think, to get the user's credentials, right? Or at the end goal, right? Means like once you have the end goal, uh, then you can execute anything. So the thing is, like, you once you get into the active directory, right? Suppose example, and then you have the user credentials, you can get the data, or you can get to the very sensitive servers in the company, right? So for that, I think the techniques, maybe we can take example of phishing attacks, right? It could be a phishing attack from where you can get the user's credentials from the insiders. If not, I think there are other ways, like as I said, the example of the dark web, from where you can get the username and the passwords, right? Apart from that, like as I said, the multi-factor authentication is not enabled in the system, then you can reuse those passwords. If
Yeah.
all these things are there in the place, then the attacker will think of the other goal, or maybe another technique to get the user's credentials, right? And then once he get into the user credentials, what are the steps he follows? So the part of it is a procedures, and once he have everything, then he try to execute the attacks, right? And to execute the attacks, if you want to go deeper to understand all these things, I think there is a cyber kill chain that is introduced by Lockheed Martin. That is one of the
Yeah.
arms, right? The biggest arms supplies of the US. So they talk about these things in details, the 7 stages of cyber crime, where I think the
Yeah.
first stage would be, if you I can recollect, the first stage would be the reconnaissance kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
where you do
Yeah.
reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is a military word where you just do kind of a surveillance and try to understand the moves of the enemy, right? After you do a reconnaissance, I think the second steps would be like uh, weaponization. So what you learn from that, you create a weapon out of it, right? So then technically how you create a weapon is like, you can create mm, as I said, the phishing page, it could be, right? It could be any other things, but just for a very general example of phishing page, from what you understand from that. Weaponization, after the weaponization, what you're trying to do, right? So you are trying to uh, attack into the system, or kind of a exploitation phase, right? You're trying to exploit, and after the attack, what other things can be done? It just like for the attack, like you try to, once you are into the system or into the enterprises, then you try to install your own system or your own exploitation tools to it. So for example, like for active directory exploration, right? So there are tools that are not built in the windows, and we have to use the third party tools to get the hashes of the user's name, for example, right? So those hashes can be used against any system, and we can get into the systems, right, without any username and passwords. So for that, the usernames, getting into that, and then control and command center, you set a control and command center into the company, right, where you can extract, exfiltrate the data, or maybe you're sending, or maybe you're controlling the environment, or the just one PC, or maybe you are scanning another PCs, are looking for more information through that system, right? So those kind of things you do. And then the end goal, right? What the end goal of the user is, or the attacker is, just like to destroy a company, or just be there and do a surveillance, get the data out of it, right? So those kind of things means, like, these are the few topics that pen testers should be aware of, and they read about this, because these other things will make your thinking like an attacker, right? And then these kind of uh, thought process will build you more into the pen tester, that you can use it in your technical assessments, whatever. If you are preparing for any pen test roles, then it will prepare you for that. So this is
Right.
what.
Yeah, I don't want to stop a passionate man. So Anshuman was like going on. So it was really good to hear. Thanks, Anshuman. So I never asked you this question, curious to. So do you think a person is actually born with an attacker mindset, or it is something that needs to be cultivated to get into pen test? I know some
Yeah,
people are born with it, but what is your take?
there are people born with it, but the methodology is right, so anything can be taught. That's what I believe,
Yep.
right? So until unless your mind is ready to pick, because we are distracted with so many things in our real life, right? So until unless you decide, like, what path. So anything can be taught. It means like we complete our schools and the universities, but there would be a favorite subject that we pick, that no one asks us to like pick you this subject, this would be your favorite one, right? So think like that. If something is favorable, it means like you studied that thing and then it become favorite to you, right? So if you have given a five option and then you already pick maths is yours, or maybe Hindi, or maybe English, right? Any other subjects could be. So just like this one, if people know about these things, like in the computer, I think early in the universities that people have given the options, because what we think or what is being done in the universities mostly is like they will be the more pressure would be building something, or maybe the coders, right? That most of the pass outs are coming as a coders from the universities. But until unless if you are giving these kind of options at the very first semester, like see after going after the eighth semester, you have these options in hand, and you can take your time after a first semester, right? These are the very basics, and I think only the introduction classes would be there. So based on that, you can check, you can look for those papers in the second semesters, and then how your life will be framed, right? So if you are giving these kind of options, then the coders would be there, but still there are many peoples in the cybersecurity or from the other domains, we can see it, right? Just like the threat hunters or the forensic investigator, because these kind of thoughts you will rarely get when you will be in the university, right? The options is not present to you, and everything will be the GP, and everything will be set for only for the code minded people. Like if you have really understand the code, write the code, then only you can have future in the computer science, right? That is how we are taught the way. But as you said, and you ask, right, like the attacker's mindset. So attacker mindset, again, if you know about that thing, this thing exists, and you learn, right? You do a case studies in the past, right? Whatever the attack carried out, how the attack carried out, uh, what was the tool used, what was the gap that time, right? What was the gap due to that this crime happened, right? So if you understand those gaps, if you study the case studies of any attacks, cyber attacks, then you will have a clear understanding, or maybe with that knowledge, right, you can use it with becoming a pen tester, or if not pen tester, that there are other like GRC roles, right? GRC roles are there. If not GRCs, then anyway means like you can be a good consultant who knows about the attacks, right? Getting into the investigations, right? Like just as I said, forensic investigation. So
Forensics.
there are
Yep.
two parts of it. Maybe one is a very technical one, and the other guy would be not technical, but he knows how the attack carried out, right? And the other technical advisories or the technical a team will assist on that, right? So that is how this can be learned, can be taught, you know.
Correct. No, great, Anshuman. No, so nice to hear your journey. Now, few things, probably which any newcomer who would like to progress in this path of, pen testing, right? So, what would be the top three challenges that you have faced in your career, right? It can be anything. Like recently, we talk about burnouts. Burnouts in cybersecurity is a very, very serious problem right now. So similar to that, your experience, like the top three challenges that any newcomer needs to be aware of, and how to address them.
Yeah. So top three, what I can think of, it has to be a combination of what we feel, what I felt, and what this generation is also facing, right? So this generation means like I have around a decade of experience, more than that. But the thing is, the challenges would be obviously as a fresher, you will not get a kind of get through into the company. So you have to start with the teaching kind of thing. I think
Mhm.
that is how I also started. So you have to share the knowledge what you have, and you from there I think you can gain the knowledge, right? So if a person is trying to directly getting into the cybersecurity field, I think it is very difficult as a pen testers or any role. I think for the freshers they will not hire you, only because I think the developers will get a early big breakthrough in the careers, but in the cybersecurity who are uh, love to get into these fields, they have a very good knowledge, but the only thing is they have the certifications and everything, but the thing is getting into a company is difficult, because this industry doesn't work like the other ones, right? So this industry makes like the trust, and you have a solid experience into the enterprises. There's only they can give you the data in the safe hands, right? So until unless you don't have any choices, or you are just a clean hand, uh, they will not give you, right? So to make that area, right, so you have to start with any other thing. Just as example I said, just teachers, right? So as a teaching, if you have very good experiences nowadays, you have YouTube, the other platforms where you can
Mm,
do teachings as well, right? Or maybe
correct.
it is good if you go to any schools or the universities, or you can take a
Mm,
kind of a guest classes there as well. The second challenge uh, would be like what that time I think now internet is a gem for all the
mm,
tutorials. We don't have to subscribe to any other things to get the knowledge, I think. And now I think coming up the AIs, right? So the chatbots and all, they will help you, I think, to just like a normal teacher, maybe they will not help you to that
right.
extent, right? So mid
Absolutely.
of the night, if you suppose, yeah, so that is what I happened, I think. Sometimes you stuck with the solution, and you are looking for exact guy who can answer your question, because that those are maybe direct answers are not available in the internet, right? So that challenges we face. And all of a sudden, I think maybe at the night, you will around 12, a question strikes now, and you have a chatbot ready, like the chat GPT, right? And you ask that it, and maybe you will get a whole context of it, right? What to look for,
Correct.
right? That is how it is evolved.
Correct.
So yeah, so for that, I think the challenges now to get information is really easy. That is not a
Mm,
challenge anymore. You have to go to a
correct.
specific person to learn that specific skill set, right? You have the things ready. You just ask him, get deeper and deeper, and if you go for a pro editions for this one, I think they will give you a very a prompt answers, and with the solutions as well, right? So you will know, okay, with the very least efforts you are getting more out of it, right?
Correct.
So that is how I think the second challenge. And the third would be to get into the right people. So even if you are learning a lot of things, but you have to be with a good circle, right? So from where you can
Correct.
raise, just like our four people, right? We met somewhere in our life, and then we decided to be together. So what's the reason for it, right? There should be a reason, that is why we are here, right? So it means like you need some people, a group where you can learn, share, right? At least whatever is of your interest of, just like the cybersecurity connects we all, right? There are other
Mm,
aspects as well, but cybersecurity is the one I think we all work in the same domain, and we share the same kind of knowledge, and we are in the industries, we even work together. So these are the things I think
correct.
you need to be, yeah, so you need to be in a group, or maybe you need to create a group where you can share and learn and be a part of it,
Yeah.
and you can overcome that challenge as well. Right.
Absolutely. Just a continuing question, Shuman. So, can you suggest few like the resources or websites where any newcomer would like who would like to learn about the basics of hacking, right? Can you name some of the websites and some of the courses which they can enroll into?
Yeah, so now I think it is very easy. So I think there are many platforms from where you can start these as a beginner. Like Udemy, I found it's a good one where you can get cheap courses as a beginner to the advanced as well. They are good instructors as well. That is one. But those are mostly to understand the thing. So I recommend those courses as a kind of a beginner. But once you have a knowledge, you need to have a kind of a hands-on knowledge, right? So for hands-on, there are other websites like Try Hack Me, Hack in the Box, right? So these are
Correct.
the websites where you learn and also do other practical stuff. So it means like the first part, what I believe is like you have to be understand everything. So consume as many resources as you find over the internet. Or maybe internet means like internet, if you blindly search for becoming a pen tester, you will like out of the path, right?
Get lost.
So you have
Yeah.
to follow a kind of a track, right, that is
Mm,
dedicated to pen test or security, any track that you love to go. So start with the small courses, because small courses will be designed in a way like that will help you to understand you are not going off the track, right? So
Correct.
you, me and others, right, it will give you that kind of a track. Now I find like try hack me, I gave an example. So try hack me is having this kind of the track path as well. So they have rooms and the courses, so where you want to, what you want to be, and where you want to see yourself after a year or 6 months, right? So you
Yes.
just follow that course, right? And with the tutorial, they will also give you the hands-on side by side. I think you don't have to go anywhere else, you don't have to install any tool in your system, you just buy their subscriptions. If you are not buying the subscription, the subscriptions are also cheaper, I think. So I think maybe 1,000 a month or something, 1,000
Right.
rupees.
Right.
If not, I think there are the free courses are available that will help you. Like suppose example of DevSecOps, right? So if you want to see yourself as a journey of the DevSecOps, like what are the
Mm.
things you need to think of and then you need to know, right? So for that, they have the special courses. Like you follow the course materials and then along with that you do the practicals. So that is the best way of learning it. Because along the way, if you're not doing it, then maybe theoretically it is good, but once you have the hands on, it is completely different. You, that will not work whatever you think that should be, right? So there are many commands, many tools, right? It keeps evolving, and in the real
Correct.
time you will face the challenges. It will not work in the real time. So that is how you need to do a practice.
So I think just a couple of maybe one or two questions from my side, Andy. So I hope you're an ethical hacker. Um, so what are the basic ethics a regular pen tester should have? Because there are a lot of information, wealthy of information available in the internet, like you said. So the same information could be used in both a positive way, make a positive impact in the community, as well as it could be used in a negative way, right? So of course, this is a kind of
Yeah.
war between an ethical hacker and an unethical hacker, right? So how do you, I mean, what are the ethics they must follow to make sure this is being used for, benefit for the entire, uh, you know, humanity and benefit for the humanity rather than, kind of using it or maybe in the wrong side? Because what I've hearing it nowadays is like, the recent wars which is going between big countries. So there's also one of the tool which is being used in the war, right? So they attack, the opposite country, and then they get into their
The
critical
cyber warfare,
infrastructure,
yeah.
and then I mean they make massive impact, right? So how do you make sure this has been, this has to benefit to the human rather than kind of destroying it, right? So yeah, over to you, Andy.
Yeah. So ethics are the things like that defines a person, right? So what information or what tool you have, it defines you. So suppose you have a knife given to you. So it's your general ethic. You will not heat the knife to me, right? Or to anyone else. Yeah, you will use that knife to cut the onion. What is it is built for? So that is your ethic. If you want, there is no such things as a caution written on the knife, don't kill an animal or don't kill a human, right? It is not there. It's your ethics, it's your experiences, right? Whatever you learned from childhood, how you see your surroundings, and then you evolve with it, right? So we are always having the killer stuff with us, just like the knife, right? We always have like the matchbox, right? It seems like a very small thing, but that can do a disaster, right? It's like if we misuse it. So misusing is the way, means like if we want to misuse anything, there could be endless things already lying in your home and you can use it for a wrong purpose. But do the right thing, it means like you have to have your own ethics, or maybe your understanding how you see uh, the life, right? So if a computer itself, just example, another example is a computer. So computer is also considered as a tool, right? Means like from where you can do the good stuffs, and maybe you can try to attack the other systems, right? You can do both from your system. Now what you do makes you, so that is nothing to do with the cybersecurity first. What your thought process is, what you are, who you are, that is a very important thing. Now if you are behind money, if you are behind some kind of revenge or any other things, right, where you think you are using that particular stuff as a tool, right, it depends on you, right? you are using a knife as a tool or you are using a computer as a tool. It depends completely on you, and then you start the attack to the person or any other thing that is not owned by you, right? So for those, I think you have to be very careful, because nowadays maybe with the knife you will not kill anyone, but if you're browsing to any restricted websites, or if you're trying to download something with the restricted websites, there are laws, right? Or if you're trying to upload something to some website, so there are laws. So you need to know like what you are using your systems with, and what are the restrictions, right? So just like if you are working in a company, in any company, that's the reason I think if once you a fresher join a company, or maybe anyone who joins a company, why a company consider that person as a fresher, right? You have to go through a mandatory training even if you have 10 years or 20 years of experience, but that company will consider you as a beginner or just a fresher. So you go through all the mandatory sessions, you signed a bond, right? uh, and then adhere to the policies, right? The once you understand, once you are part of the company, what the company thinks you become, right? After you become a part of that company, you admits everything what the company deals with, right? The thought process, or could be just like the culture, right? Once you get into the culture, then company will accept you, and then you pass the probation period, and then you work in a company. So that's a culture, it's like that's the thing. So until unless you get into something, and as example I said, right? So it's like the company, why the company will treat you as a trainee or a fresher, that's the reason. It's like they will want you, whatever you from whichever company you came from, or whatever you think, right? It doesn't have to do anything. This is what I want you to think like, right? Behave like, and then you do the behavior, just like the example of pause, right? So maybe I think of something else, but the company will strictly have the policies where you think like the company thinks, like this is a crime. So they want these kind of behavioral to bit into you, and if you do this thing, even if you're going through these documents, again you will be it will be a criminal activity, and then you have to leave the company, right? So that is how I think behaviorals are enforced, or maybe you have to read and understand, right? So there are many things specific to the company, there are many specific things, the regulations over the internet as well, right? So whatever the websites are, suppose like some websites are there that are illegal in nature, so sometimes like government also do efforts to block those websites. It could be any kind of a forged websites, phishing websites, any kind of illegal websites from where you buy your services. So you don't go to don't websites, and you know like what are the legitimate websites to go, and to update yourself, right? Getting into the criminal thing, or the criminal activities, or thinking as a criminal is another topic, from where you can think like an attacker, but better like don't clone yourself as an attacker, right? So the thing is like, if you know something that need to be reported, just like our thing, right? So why we do the FIRs, or if you as a prudent man rule, right? If you go to somewhere and you will find something is not working there, maybe you will inform to the authorities, right? If suppose the road is broken, yeah, as a citizen, what you do, you report it to the authorities, and they will take care of you. In an office, if something is not working accordingly, you inform them, right? So that is how you develop yourself. If something in a website or anywhere, eh, in any devices, right, inside the company, outside the company, anywhere you see any kind of a technical thing that is not as per it is, and then the bad guys can take it over, then there is always a kind of uh, a team that is there, the help desk or something, like you just reach out to them and they will assist, or maybe they will fix it. So just now we are calling them mostly like the bug bounties and all, right? But there are many websites, they maybe they are not running the bug bounties, but they appreciate the efforts if any of the security researchers if they found anything on their websites, and then they validate it and they are happy to fix it. So
Thanks, Andy.
that is
Just
what.
to add to Anshuman, I think where did we come across this prudent man rule? I think in Sharan's training, I guess, we're doing CS, because that's a very good paradigm to follow. Prudent man rules. What will a prudent man do in any circumstances? Again, circumstances makes or breaks a person. So, person has, I mean, 90% of people are good in nature. It's only circumstances which makes them do. So, you put him in right circumstances, you give a discipline, you give him a goal. I think good ethics will come as part of the package. That's my
Yeah,
take.
yeah, yeah. I think again, if the person is associated with a certain organization, he has to follow the policies and standard which is set forward in that organization. Even if he is not, so if it is a he is a a citizen, right, and he should act responsibly, right, and making sure that he has some sort of basic ethics, right? So that's what I mean. Just I understood, Andy, from your kind of response to the question. And this is the second one, I think, just to finish off, right? So how does a day look like for the regular pen tester? So
Okay. So for the pen testers, I think I'll give you a general flow. Like, suppose we are making um, a new functionalities into application, right? So that functionality will have you log into that functionality. Just name it a login, right? So a login functionality that will allow the users to log into a particular system, right? So that is how a new functionality that will come to you in a fine day. And in the morning, I think you have assigned this task. So the first thing would be not jumping into the technical stuff, but as I said, right, the threat modelings, and also you need to understand what this is actually, what it means to you, right? Then what you do is, like, you gather the team members who are working on this one. It could be the project manager, it could be the developers, it could be any testing guy, like who do a kind of a stress test or kind of a UAT test, right? So to make the functionality work, so you gather these guys and try to understand as much as you can with the documents, if it is provided, with the diagrams, if it is provided. If not, then you understand and you map it into the brain, or maybe you use your own tool, just like I do, kind of draw.io, or maybe any other tool, like the free versions, like where you can draw the steps what they are talking about. Because at the initial level, the challenge in the enterprises or the organization, they don't have anything in their hands. As a, it could be the diagrams would not be present, right? So if the diagrams are not present, then you do it yourself in the websites like draw.io. If you don't have a proper diagrams, if you can't draw it, then also you do a kind of text based data flow diagrams. So not with the rounds and the circles, right? So don't follow that one, but do a initial text base, just like the user, right? This is a web application, so you write these things so that you understand the basic flow of it, right? Then when you gather the people, you understand, okay, this is a login functionalities, and that you are going to test it out. So how you are going to test this out, right? What are the threats you can think of at that stage, right? So you can think of like many other things where you can question them, maybe, or they will help you understand, right? So the login means, like, if it is used for the internal users, external users, right? What kind of users we are expecting at this login, right? So this application is just like for the internal use, maybe then they will say, okay, this is for the internal use, and what kind of login it would be. So maybe the developer will say, okay, it will be having a kind of local login, the DB logins, right? Then you will say, okay, the DB logins, but the challenge would be there, like, uh, it shouldn't be a DB login, it should be a kind of LDAP where you have the complete policies to be enforced, as I said, right? The goals. So you have to look for a higher angle, like these are the things that need to be there. If something that is like locally built, or maybe where you don't have much control over it, then you enforce these things, right, at the very design level. You say, like, going with the DB logins or the local logins, you should come up with something like where we have more controls over the user accounts, right? So then you tell them, okay, maybe can we use the existing LDAP protocols. So existing LDAP protocols, if we have, then they can say, like, the integration to the AD, right? So if we have the AD environments, then these things will work, and from there you can enforce endless things on the user accounts. So like uh, creating a new user, deleting a new user, permissions, right? Password policies, anything, whatever you want, you can enforce those things in a very common central place. So that is how you do that stuff. Now, moving forward, what you understand from them is okay, the login is there, the user. Now we know how the user will log into the system, right? Now you need to understand, once the login is happening, how the data is being saved, or maybe where is the middleware that is acting like the logics, right? If the username fails, who decides these things, the logical things. Now, once the username and password is wrong, then what kind of messages we are putting into the website, right? That is should be a generic kind of thing. Doesn't show like the username is wrong, the password is wrong, something like that. So you do the initial steps, you tell them, question them, and before the building, cause if you say these things or maybe if you advise these things, they will build a right product, right? If you will not, I think any other stage, if you think of these things, then it will be difficult for them also to roll it out again, to roll back and put these things. Maybe it will impact the other functionalities in the application, right? So once you are making it, you try to make it that product should be 80% secure. Anything that is left over, maybe we can do at the internal pen test or the external pen test, right? But what you are building, maybe you will know, like even if you are building a rock solid thing, right, in the security by design principles, right, you are thinking of the attacks and then you are building it and then you're doing it. So to answer your questions, the day will be starting like this. You do a lot of threat modelings at that day. If anything that is already ready, then you try to do a kind of internal test to that application or to that functionality. So there are many tests available, right? As I said, uh, for example, like the fuzz testing, right? The fuzz is a word like where we do a kind of a random values putting into the application inputs areas, like wherever the inputs can be. It could be the input field, it could be any other http requests or the headers or any other availables. uh, and then you look for like how the application behaves, right? Once you have like those responses in place, then you identify, okay, if it is the right response, application behaves like that. If the application, if it is a wrong response, or maybe that application is not expecting that response, then this is expecting or maybe behaving like this, right? So after this behavior or from the responses from the particular functionality of the application, how you are furthering exploiting this, it can be exploited. Sometimes what we see is like the error codes, right? So maybe if it is error code that is directly generated in a raw format in the application, and that is visible to the end user. So we always do a kind of a best practice to just show the error codes kind of thing, and in the back end it will have the very detailed versions of it, so that only the developers will know about it, right? But not the end users. So that is how you do, you improve the, it's not always about the technicals, but always about the processes and finding the flaws at the design, and working in a team and learning from them as well, and training the team as well. Like, you know how you are turning a developer into a security minded people, right? So no more, earlier what happened is like the developers are the one who is just doing the coding from their whatever the requirement they get it from their projects, and the security team is putting a lot of effort to train them, right? But now I think it's filling the gaps, and as a part of DevSecOps and all, what you do is like you try to put everyone into a security minded, so that whatever step they are doing, or whatever task they are evolved in, or they are building, they will be a first security minded people, and they will think security first when they are building anything, right? So for the operations or the developers, you are training them on everyday basis or weekly basis, and making their uh, job uh, good, maybe, because once if any flaw will be found, then again they have to rework on it, right? But if they are building the right stuff, then less for them as well, right? For the tickets and all these things, what we say is they build the steps and then something is not working in the UAT, again a lot of things need to be done, right? So for the functionality also, pen testers or maybe the testing environments is like that, they do their own level of testing first, and then they push the code to the central servers, right, for the merge in the dev, branches or anywhere that testing will happening, right? So for that, they do initial level of testing, writing the code, doing their own testing, just like auditing their own work, and then they are submitting it for the peer review or maybe for the others to test it. So that is how the improvements is also done.
Thanks a lot, Andy.
Great, great. I think this was a long session. I didn't want to stop Anshuman because he was in fluent. He was very passionate about his work.
Thanks.
All right, let's wrap it up, Anshuman. Thank you so much for joining in and giving us the insight of a pen tester's life, a day in pen tester, and how do you start and the challenges typically you would face during a pen test. Although this was a quite exciteful week as well because we had Grok 3 and we had, I still cannot pronounce the name, Morana 1 from Microsoft, Quantum Chip, which got me really excited. But we'll talk about them till the next
Yeah.
time. All right, gentlemen, thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.
Have a wonderful
Thank
weekend and
you.
have a great start to the Monday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anshuman.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.